My man, how you doing?
Good. Are we starting?
Yes, we're in Miami.
We're in
Let's
Miami
go.
in the 305. In the
Yes.
305.
How is it to be out here? How do you like the
It's
city so
it's still crazy to me just walking in February in shorts. Like it's not normal for me.
far? Yeah, well, you
Haven't
live
been
in
in
New York.
yeah.
It's cold out there.
Yeah, it snowed the last couple of weeks, a couple times. So
Yeah.
I've kind of been hibernating. So it's nice to just be able to walk around the streets and be comfortable. So,
Yeah, I'm kind of used to it. Like, I never wear
yeah.
a jacket or anything when I go outside, but out there, it's
Yeah.
snowing, and then you have to.
It's the two extremes, right? Like it's super cold, and then when you go into, you're burning up when you go into stores and the
Yeah.
subway, so you're peeling off layers, and you always have to take a shower when you get back because of all the sweat. So
Well, I'm glad you're here.
yeah,
I'm very
thanks for
glad
having
you're
me.
here. You come visit in Miami. I'm
Yeah.
glad we're doing this podcast.
Yeah,
I'm
this is my first time in Miami. Actually, I've never even been in the airport before, so
Okay.
this is all new, and it's crazy. As soon as you get here, so much Spanish being spoken, and there are people who don't speak English at all, whether it be Uber drivers, shop owners.
Well, that's
so.
good for you. You get to practice
Yeah.
Spanish.
Yeah, it's fun. My brother loves Miami because he thinks it's like a Latin American city,
Yeah.
and he's really big into Spanish.
Well, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. When's the last time that, like, in New York, that you speak Spanish a lot? Is that,
Yeah,
like, when's the last time you spoke it
that's
a
a good
lot?
question. I think at bodegas, sometimes you just like order something like a chopped cheese or just a quick order. Sometimes you say it in Spanish. I think I used to do that in Harlem because there'd be Spanish speakers, but the people that work at the bodega near where I live now in the Upper West Side, they're more Middle Eastern, so I don't speak Spanish as much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
Are you forgetting?
also depends.
Or no? You still remembering everything?
What do you mean?
Like your Spanish?
Oh yeah. Sometimes, I mean, if I'm having long, prolonged conversations, there are words that I forget, but I'm actually surprised myself. I've kept quite a bit of it. I haven't lost too much.
Yeah, I mean, your Spanish was great back in the day.
Yeah,
Well,
I still have that gringo accent, but what can you do?
nah, it's alright.
Can't roll the R's with the tongue.
Because, like, let's bring it back, because when you were born, like, you were born in North Carolina,
That's correct.
but your dad is Mexican.
Yeah,
right?
he was born in Mexico
Mexican
City. Yeah.
Okay, so then, like, did he ever speak Spanish to you growing up?
Actually, so he's what you'd call a polyglot. So he speaks French, German, Italian, and Spanish.
Wow.
And he loves, and Portuguese. I almost forgot one.
Yeah.
He loves speaking French. So actually, when I was young, he would speak to me, from my earliest memories, more in French than Spanish.
Yeah.
And me being really resistant as a kid, I didn't want to learn any of it. So it wasn't really, my journey kind of with Spanish didn't really start till middle school when I actually took classes. I never really spoke at home because my mom doesn't speak a lick of Spanish.
Yeah.
She recently learned, actually, because we went to a wedding in Mexico.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I really didn't speak Spanish at home growing up at all. The only time I spoke Spanish growing up was there was a park like 5-minute walk away from my house, and we'd always play soccer with the Mexicans. That's what my brother and I would say. So we would, a little vocab here and there, and just being exposed to
Just
that.
the soccer vocab, that's usual around for the soccer players in the US.
Exactly. Para la pelota.
Pásala.
Órale pues.
Yeah, no, that's how you learn. Honestly, that's how you learn.
Yeah.
Just by, like, spending a lot of time with people who are speaking the language as much as possible. I mean, that's what I've seen.
Exactly.
Like, in my experiences in learning languages and such, is that if you immerse yourself in a place where you're, like, forced to speak the language, that's how you learn the most.
Yeah, you don't learn from textbooks and memorizing vocab.
Yeah.
You have to apply it, and the way you do that is by putting yourself in those situations.
Well, you do that a lot. You're a very outgoing guy that, like, would put yourselves in positions to practice, like, and to do these things. Did that come already from, like, when you were young, or?
Not at all. I was a completely different person, honestly, growing up, I would say. Yeah, I guess we could start, elementary school. It's kind of a little fuzzy. I don't remember too much.
Yeah.
I went to like a leadership magnet school, so there was like some public speaking elements. So maybe some of that like stuck with me in terms of being outgoing and being approachable. But I would just say, like in middle school and high school in particular, I didn't really have the highest self-esteem, and I didn't go and approach people, and I was kind of a shell of myself. That's how I kind of look at it. So it really took me actually really getting out of my comfort zone the first time or the best example is going to California to SoCa, and because I did K through 12 in North Carolina, and I just knew like I needed a fresh start. It's like, okay, I'm not going to grow. I wasn't happy with my trajectory. I was like, I'm not going to grow, and I don't like, who I've become, so to speak. I know that there's untapped potential there. That's the way I kind of saw it.
So what's it like growing up in North Carolina?
Not South Carolina, North Carolina.
Yeah, I know I'm messing with you. Always say South Carolina, but like, what's South Carolina like? Can you paint me a picture? How
sure.
You can describe in books, and I can vividly see it.
Well,
paint me a picture.
I don't really need to anymore because you came and visited once, but but basically, I mean, the way I describe it to people, it's a great place to raise a family. Lots of walks in nature, a lot of parks within walking distance, but also like 5-10 minutes driving. So that would be a common activity I would do with my family on the weekends, go on walks, hikes.
Yeah.
Very green, very verdant. I guess the negative is I'm allergic to pollen, so there's a lot of trees.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I'd always be blowing my nose, But where I lived, I really enjoyed it actually growing up because I had a lot of friends in the neighborhood, and there were like cul-de-sacs, like bunch of houses around, and like in a circle, so to speak, and there were a lot of younger people, but it was very transient. Like the friends that I had would come and go, so I had a lot of different friends in the neighborhood, but they would be in the neighborhood for maybe a year, 2 years, and move away. But when you're a kid, like I wasn't really playing video games. I would do a lot of like outdoor activities, like cops and robbers, and we did this fun game called flashlight tag, where if one person has to like tag people with a flashlight, essentially like shine a light on them, and everyone wears like dark, all black, so they can hide, and it's kind of like a hide and seek with a flashlight.
Well, that's a good game. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and that would be on the weekends. Like obviously, once the sun set, it's pitch dark, and some guys, like I said, would just wear all black, and they'd lay on the grass, and sometimes you get stepped on, and people really get into it.
Because they don't see you?
Yeah, because they don't see you. Yeah, and then I think I would take it a little too far. Like I'd hide under people's like homes, and I'm sure people are looking from their windows like, "What's this guy doing?" But yeah, that was like the form of entertainment. That, cops and robbers, like all kinds of. I had a neighbor who had a zip line in his backyard, so riding the zip line.
Had a zip line in the backyard.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So you all just took turns at going on the zip line.
For sure. And actually, this guy, his mom was crazy. She's Russian. He's a Russian guy. She would not refuse to let him be inside. He always had to be outdoors. So he became so creative because his mom wouldn't let him be indoors playing video games, playing with toys, whatever it may be, right? So whether it be cops and robbers, or he had airsoft guns, like it was always outdoor activities. Yeah. So it was a really good friend to have growing up because it forced me, to really use my imagination.
Well, I think like as a child, being outside is the best thing you can do, right? So you stay out until the sunset comes down, and your mom's like, tell me you come for dinner, but you want to stay out, with your friends, like keep doing stuff. And
beyond that, obviously, I'm a big, ball sports guy. So it was basketball and soccer. Actually, one of the earliest images I have myself of me holding a basketball, because I'd always play basketball, pick up basketball at North Carey Park. That's the park I'd always go to. I'd pick up soccer with the Mexicans, so to speak, and then I'd pick up basketball and be king of the court. So if you win, you could be there till like 9 o'clock, and at that point, you're not going to eat dinner because it's too late. You just go to bed.
If you're winning, you're not going to...
you go to bed happy. You go to bed happy,
You're not going to leave if you're winning, right? You're going to stay on and protect that court like at all costs.
At all costs, that's right, yeah. So, I was outside a lot. I think everyone has a little video game phase, but I wasn't a big gamer at all.
Yeah. So but that's how you grew the love for sports, let's say, like just playing basketball, soccer.
Definitely.
American football as well, or no?
Yeah, American football as well on the street.
All around.
Just like two-hand touch. I think once or twice played tackle on like the soccer field, but mostly it was like two-hand touch. So American football, basketball, soccer were the big three. Yeah.
So what was it like in school in North Carolina, like in the like middle school and such? Like how would you say it's like different from other experiences that you've had that you've heard of?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so the best schools were in Raleigh, and I live in Cary. So I wanted to go to like magnet schools and get really good, really good education. Yeah. So the downside to that was I didn't really have any friends there from the neighborhood. So everybody went to like the local Cary High or, West Cary Middle School, whereas I went to schools where I'd be not commuting because I don't commute, but driving. When I didn't have the license, my parents would be taking me 15, 20 minutes away. So I didn't really have that community, I'd say. But in terms of the school itself, it was like any other school. Like you take a bus in the morning because there was a period where I rode the bus, and then you come back home, but you're on the bus for like 30, 40 minutes, and it's fun at first, but then after like 20 minutes, you run out of ideas of things to do.
Did you have lockers?
I did have lockers. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
You didn't have a locker at school?
No.
Oh, okay.
No lockers.
Yeah, I just remember using it like for gym clothes. Like when I had to go to a gym class, you put your stuff in your locker and then take it out. So.
We just put the backpack like on the back of the chair,
Oh, okay. So yeah, we had lockers. In middle school, I was on the middle school soccer team, and I actually thought that's probably one of the highlights in middle school was two things come to mind. One, I scored like a game-winning goal in overtime, and everyone carried me off the field. Like it was insane. It wasn't like an amazing team that we beat, but it was dramatic. It was so dramatic. Like when someone played me a through ball, and just as I was shooting the ball, I got hit. So I released it just in the nick of time, and I got like whacked, fell down, and as I'm on the ground, I see the ball go in the bottom corner. Yeah. And it was just
was it like a last minute goal?
Elation. Yeah, it was just as dramatic as it comes, and that was
the best type of goals, no matter what. No matter if it's who, those are the best goals.
Yeah. So and I don't think I'd scored that much that season, but I wouldn't trade that for scoring a game-winning goal in overtime.
So they all carried you off the field, started chanting your name.
I don't know about the chanting, but they carried me off the field. So that was pretty cool. I wish I had a photo of that. I don't have a photo of it, but so that, and then the other thing too, I did like mile runs, like like 2K. So there was, for the life of me, I can't think of the name of it, but there was like a turkey. Yeah, that's what it was. It's called Turkey 2K. So if you win, you get like a Thanksgiving turkey. It was around that period. Okay. And I think I came in second place, but it was like among all the best runners. At the school, so that was pretty cool. I was proud of that accomplishment. Yeah. So I'd say those are like two sports-related accomplishments I was really proud of, and I was always a really good student, so I got pretty good grades.
Yeah. Were you involved in any other like organizations or any other things like other than soccer or track?
So I was pretty single-minded back then. So I was all in on soccer. It was like professional soccer bust. So on the weekends, travel soccer, parents taking me to tournaments, hotels. And I was a really good student, I think just because I was very competitive as being an athlete, so I just wanted to do the best at whatever I did. Yeah. But yeah, no, I was pretty single-minded.
And then in high school as well, like
same
soccer.
Same thing, yeah. And like most of my friends were just soccer buddies. Like we would just kick a ball around, and I'd play goalie because I always like playing goalie for fun. Yeah. In the game, it's a little bit too much pressure, but for fun, you're just diving around, you're getting dirty. So we would just like take turns shooting and playing pickup soccer on the weekends, and then you play soccer. Same thing with basketball. Like you're playing for hours pickup, and then I just remember like, you just go to a gas station afterwards and get like a nice like frozen drink. Oh, those are the days, man. That was great. And I also played indoor as well. So I was playing outdoor, indoor soccer. So yeah, it was soccer ruled. That was king, and definitely my mom grumbled about that a few times.
Did you play with your brother as well?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, we were obviously different age groups, so we're on different teams, and but we're very different people. Like my uncle calls him a chillmeister, like very laid back, chill. I'm a little bit more like type A, intense, so to speak. So we kind of clashed, and we've started to get closer. I would say now, like as he's gotten older and I've gotten older, but I don't think we were super close when we were young. And we'd play from time to time and stuff, but sometimes we clashed and bickered and stuff, like good brothers do, big brothers.
Oh yeah, brothers always fight.
Yeah, exactly. So not too much to answer your question.
And then you were in high school in North Carolina, but then you decided to go all the way to California for college. Like, guide me through that decision and how that
came about. Yeah. So first of all, I didn't even know that SoCA existed. So at that time, I applied to all the local schools, right? Like. So North Carolina has very good schools. Yeah. There's some Ivy League schools, but there's also some really good public universities. So I applied to UNC Chapel Hill, UNC Wilmington, UNC Charlotte, Elon University, High Point. These are all in North Carolina. Some are good for business, others are good for the medical field. They all have their specialties. NC State's good for engineering. I'd also applied to Wake Forest, and that's like more to top tier school, and I got waitlisted there. But all the others I mentioned I got into. And it just so happens my mom bumped into someone in the grocery store who was an alum from SoCA.
Okay.
And she spoke very highly of it. And things just moved so fast. Like after she kind of planted that seed, and then after that, I still had this yearning. I still wanted to play soccer in college. Like I still had the dream. I hadn't given up. I still thought maybe there's a chance. If I play in college, I could go pro. So I found out that SoCA had a soccer team, and this is what's like unusual. I'm very much an outlier. I called the coach, and I spoke with him, and it just so happens that Coach Kano, our first soccer coach at SoCA, he had played professionally with one of my coaches. His name's John Kerr. So because of that, he knew that I had a good foundation. Like I had a good teacher. I was under his tutelage, so that he has to be a good player because this guy coached him, right?
How did you know that? Like, did you tell him? Oh yeah.
He asked me who I played for. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And after that, you could see kind of his eyes light up.
Yeah.
His eyes light up. I guess you couldn't see. You could hear it. You knew on the phone. But it's insane. I still can't believe this because he never came to see me play. Like he wasn't willing to fly across the country in North Carolina. And I only went to camps during that period in order to get my self out there. I just went to camps. I never made a recruitment video. We really were behind the 8 ball with that, my dad and I, because a lot of these kids, their parents made recruitment videos for them. They sent them out, mass emails. I just went to a couple camps, and I think I got one letter from, it's called Ferrum University. Supposedly Dempsey went. I think Dempsey went there.
Okay.
And that was.
You play soccer as Dempsey.
yeah. And I think it's. I'm trying to think what the turnoff was there. Well, for one, they didn't offer me a soccer scholarship. I think they just offered me a merit scholarship, and it was also, a D3 school. It just didn't. It wasn't that sexy,
Yeah.
I think South Carolina is where it is, and I had gone to a camp around that area, and that's how the coach had seen me, and I was playing as a 6, and I just remember that camp. I just was passing the ball sideways and backwards. I just didn't want to lose the ball, so I probably had a 99% pass completion rate, and I was just very tidy in possession. But yeah, so Kano pretty much took a chance on me. He's like, okay, you had this background, you played for John Kerr, who played with me professionally in the U.S., and I really respect him, so I'm going to take a chance on you. And I got a soccer and merit, so I always tell people this. I probably told you this. It was cheaper for me to go to California than to stay in North Carolina. Yeah. And I needed a fresh start, at the end of the day. So it was just perfect. I could still get to play soccer, and I get a fresh start. I wouldn't have to, see all the people I went to school with in high school.
You live in South California.
Southern California,
15 minutes from the beach. You can't go wrong there.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. And my brother was so jealous, man, because he had been to Laguna before I went to SoCA, and he loves Laguna. He watches all these surfing videos. He was skimboarding at the time.
Yeah.
It's probably a good thing I went there because he would never have studied. He would have been at the beach every day. So yeah, he's he even looks like a California kid. And it's funny how things work. I'm the one who ended up going there. So.
Yeah. And good decision to go to California.
Yeah, best decision of my life. So. Yeah.
So why do you say that?
Well, because there's a clear before and after for me. Before I went to California and SoCA, I really had a low self-esteem, and I was kind of a shell of myself. I wasn't really putting myself out there, and also I was very single-minded, right? It was soccer or bust. I didn't really know what my other interests were, and it was through SoCA I began to explore those other interests. Yeah. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'll let you ask the next question. So.
No. I'm just here to hear. What do you got to say?
Yeah, I would say.
How did you develop these interests at SoCA? Because of course it's a liberal arts school, so you get to study many different things. What are some of the interests that you developed?
I'll start from the beginning. So I majored in, right? I majored in the international studies concentration. I picked the international studies. I like that. It sounds a little better. I picked the international studies concentration just because I wanted to travel. That was literally my justification. It's I want to have a job where I can travel the world. Yeah. So there wasn't too much of a thought process that went behind that. And really what the first interest or inkling I had was I took a Peter Burns course. He was my favorite professor at SoCa, and it was public policy, and I loved it. You know, I was like, okay, I want to work at a think tank, because that's people who work at think tanks get to draft public policy. And so I applied. This is the summer of my sophomore year, the summer before my junior year. I applied to all the think tanks in DC. Like I applied to the RAND Corporation, Brookings Institute, a couple others, and I got rejected from all of them. And because I was applying to a lot of internships that summer, before that summer. And it just so happens on a whim, I applied for a journalism internship, and I really half-assed the application. Like I didn't put a lot of thought into it, like very curt, short word answers. And it just so happened that was the only place I got a response from. Okay. And they, again, kind of a similar theme with the soccer, they took a chance on me because liberal arts school, we had a student newspaper, I wasn't really writing for it, so I didn't have clips, so to speak. Yeah. So what did I send them? I sent them my 10-page policy briefs from my liberal arts, from my public policy class. Yeah. That was the only journalism, quote unquote, that I had done. And I guess they were impressed about my brief on ending homelessness in the city or community policing enough that they said, okay, we'll take a chance on this guy. So I'll forever be grateful to Elizabeth Donatelli. She's the director the director of the National Journalism Center internship. Yeah. And this was in DC. It was her and Kelly Huber. Those were the two ladies that were kind of the program directors. And it was a very interesting internship. So I always describe it as being multi-layered in the sense that I got assigned to a publication. In this case, it was Voice of America. It's a public news agency. And I go there 4 times a week. And then on Fridays, I go to Virginia. So Reston, Virginia, which is a little bit further out than DC, so I take the train for training. We'd have like journalism training, all the other interns. So there was like, I don't know, I want to say 30 to 40 of us. Okay. And all of us got assigned to different like outlets. There was another girl who was with me at Voice of America, and then we also were together on Fridays with the class. Yeah. So that's what sparked my interest in journalism, was not the trainings per se, but and I forgot one thing. On Tuesday nights, we would get investigative journalism. It was a boot camp, and there was somebody who would train us on how to be investigative journalists. So it was a Tuesday night commitment, then Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5 internship, and then training. So it was really a lot packed in.
So that internship, and it was really like the first time that you went into journalism.
Yeah, and I got paid a lot of money. Like I was really well compensated. It was like $1,200 a month. Nice. So I ended up using that money for study abroad.
That's okay. You did so many things. I know you did Bridges to Business.
That's true. We were in Bridges to Business.
The MUN.
Yeah.
What else?
Very short-lived, MUN.
The Model and United Nations.
I mean, I had internships. You guys would always make fun of me for being in my internship clothes. And I worked at like a law firm, a personal injury law firm. Oh, yeah. I also worked at Active Ride Shop, a little retail. Yeah. So yeah, I did a lot of different things actually. Now you mention it, yeah. But I want to go back to the internship really quickly to finish that thought. So I was at Voice of America, and the actual job I had, I hated. I was because again, I didn't have formal journalism experience, so I thought, okay, what can we give this guy to do that's so easy you can't mess it up? Yeah. So I was pretty much just logging B-roll. I was just pretty much labeling videos. I would watch videos they were doing. I was on this team that was documenting the opioid crisis. It's pretty heavy stuff across the U.S. in different cities. I want to say in North Carolina and Florida, and then in Philadelphia, Kensington. I remember that name because I saw all these videos, Kensington, Philadelphia. And it's pretty depressing stuff, man. Like I'd watch addicts like stab themselves with needles in a dark room, logging B-roll. So as you can imagine, it wasn't very fulfilling work. And I was miserable. Like I was not happy. But what was great about the work situation was I was in proximity to all these other journalists who were doing cool work. It was a very international office. Actually, VOA, they have reporters all over the world. So during the World Cup, everyone would have their one computer screen with their desktop with their email, and the other one with a World Cup game going on. So it was super cool being there during the World Cup. And I kind of was guilty of that too. I would be watching the World Cup too. But what really changed for me again, another mom encounter in a grocery store. My mom was in Whole Foods in North Carolina, and she bumped into one of my former soccer coaches.
Yeah.
And they just, he was asking about me, and she shared with him, oh, he's in DC. And this soccer coach mentioned to her, you know what, like there's a soccer program that I wanted to go check out in DC. Connect me with your son, like connect me to Julian, and give me, let me have his number so then I can, coordinate a visit. We can maybe go together. And that ended up being my first ever like journalistic piece. It was about a program called DC Scores, and they would essentially do free soccer training for kids in Title I schools, which are very underprivileged, low economic areas.
Yeah.
Low socioeconomic status, right? And that was what really got me excited about journalism, because so basically that was the spark, and then I took that idea and ran with it, and I went to one of like the senior journalists, reporters in the kind of vicinity of my cubicle, and I said, hey, like I had this idea, I think this would be great for, the international audience to see, about what's going on in the community in DC, and they liked it, and they were willing to. And this wasn't part of my internship. Like I said, I was logging videos, so I had to do this on the side during my lunch breaks, stuff like that. And I ended up, from start to finish, organizing everything. Like I interviewed the directors over the phone. I went to the school to take photos. So I took all the photos in the story.
Yeah.
So it all came together.
So that's how you started to like, okay, now I love journalism. This is what I want to do.
Exactly. I got a taste of it, and I'll just never forget. It was like a kid in the candy store the day when my story got published live. And my byline, seeing my name, and it was on the main website. And it was the first thing you saw when you went to the website. Yeah. And what made it even sweeter was, after my story ran, there was this radio show. Again, VOA isn't just like digital news; they also have radio and broadcasts called The Sunny Side of Sports. And they needed someone to fill like 30 minutes because somebody had canceled on them. And they were just scrolling through the website and they saw my article, and I got to go on the radio. So this is my second time ever kind of being on the radio for Mike. First time was in DC. So.
Okay. So you've had some practice then.
I guess so. And I remember like it was yesterday, right before I was scheduled to go on air, like I scarfed down a pizza, me and like two of the other guys. It was our lunch break. Just had like three slices of pizza, then walked in. And I just remember seeing that little sign, it says live and it flashes.
On air.
On air, exactly. That's it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my goodness, I made it,
That's cool.
And this radio show gets broadcast to countries in Africa, English-speaking countries in Africa. Okay. And it actually has I don't remember at the top of my head how many people, listeners, but it's a really large reach. It has a really big reach. And yeah, they pretty much just wanted to know like how the story came about, and some guy called in as well. So it was like me talking to the interviewer, but then there was also like a father whose son performed well at a soccer tournament. So I was talking to him as well. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And then that's when you decided that, okay, I want to go into journalism. So like that last year at Soka, you already like.
So there's one more step before that.
Yeah.
So that was definitely the spark, and I was like, okay, I can see myself doing this. This is awesome. I want to have that feeling again, that feeling of satisfaction, seeing my work get published. Mm-hmm. But who was really pivotal was this guy who was teaching me investigative journalism. So pretty much throughout this boot camp, the idea was to do our own investigative story and kind of see it through. But most of the participants, ended up kind of dropping the class because they were busy with their, assignments, with their internships. They just had too much on their plate. And I was one of the few who really tried to see it out. And I was doing an investigative piece on the VA, and I talked to some doctors who'd seen a lot of medical malpractice and, unsanitary, just bad practices within hospitals in Cincinnati and New Mexico. So long story short, that story didn't get published, but what it did show is that I was very hungry and driven, and I think that impressed the teacher. Funny enough, at this point, this was when I was 20 years old, and I didn't hear a peep from him while I was 20 years. I turned 21 at the end of the internship before I had to go back for preseason training for Soka. And it wasn't until, funny enough, my birthday, August 4th, I get an email from this guy, and he says, yeah, I'd love to meet with you about this, to discuss your investigative piece. Like, meet me at this bar. And so the meeting date was scheduled for the last day of my internship. Yeah. So I told my internship supervisor at Voice of America, I said, and this is at noon, it was my lunch break. I said, I'll be quick, it's just going to be an hour. I'm just meeting with my supervisor to talk about my investigative piece. This is a project I've been working on. And she said, okay, no worries. I end up being there 4.5 hours. And we don't even talk about my investigative piece. At one point, he's chirping with these guys about hockey. Then we're talking about, Malcolm Gladwell. I mean, it was just the most wide-ranging conversation you could imagine. And this guy he's one of one. Like he smoked maybe like 15 cigarettes in the span of 3 hours. There's an ashtray. He was drinking, like guzzling beers, and me like trying to impress him. I was trying to keep up, match him beer for beer.
Yeah.
And he paid for everything, because just that's the kind of guy he is, classy guy. And at one point I was like, okay, Bill, this has been fun, but look, I know that because the big mantra, the big message during our internship was you don't need a master's degree to get into journalism. Like all the guest speakers that would come to our Friday classes, they would say you don't need a master's degree. But I knew I did because I was just working at a student newspaper and it wasn't the most professional operation ever.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, Bill, if I have to get a master's degree, where should I go? And he said, these are the 3 schools. If you're going to get a master's, these are the 3 schools. He said, Missouri, University of Missouri, Columbia, and Northwestern. I was like, really, Missouri? He's like, yeah, actually they have a really good J school.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So those are the only schools I applied to, those 3.
Yeah.
And he wrote my recommendation letter. So I wrote it, he signed it. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then you decided to go to Missouri. How's that? What's Missouri like?
Yeah, so I guess before we dive into that really quickly, so after the DC internship, just to put a bow on it, I really dove into writing for the school newspaper because I wanted to have clips. I didn't want to just have those policy briefs,
Yeah.
So I did as much as I could. I even wrote like game recaps. I don't know if you remember those.
Of course I remember those.
I interviewed like a city council member. I did some like cool stuff. I interviewed, when I was on study abroad, I was the blog writer.
Yeah.
So before we get to the Mizzou, this is like one of the most pivotal moments. So I really think first 2 years, I started to come out of my shell, but it was really study abroad. That was probably a big turning point in my life.
Because you went to Granada, Spain.
I went to Granada, and I didn't want to go there initially, actually. I wanted to go to Quito, Ecuador. But everyone from there was like 5 or 6 students there, and I thought, I want to get out of my comfort zone. Like, if I'm going with a bunch of other students, it's going to be so easy to just speak English and not learn the language.
Yeah.
So I went to Granada, Spain, not because I knew anything about it, but I just kind of like saw no Soka students were going there, and I thought, okay, I'll go there myself.
Yeah, you wanted to go to a place where it was just you.
Exactly. And I studied Spanish, so I had to pick a Spanish-speaking country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was a great decision, right? Because when you went to Granada, you unleashed.
Yeah. So, no, for sure. I mean, definitely I'm so happy, first of all, that I didn't go the hotel option. That would have just diluted the experience considerably. Yeah. I went the host family option, so I had a host brother that looked like me, which is crazy. We're like brothers from another mother. 2 host brothers. One really buff, burly guy, and the other guy looks like me, but a little bit more muscular, a little more muscular tone. And then, it was really cool. I mean, I was in a house. The host mom actually ran a business, so even though I was there would also be other international students that would come like each week. Yeah. So there'd be French kids. These are all high school students through Erasmus, which is like the big European exchange program. There would be Irish kids. I mean, it was a girl from Tokyo, Japan. So it was a very international. It felt like living in the subway stations, people coming and going. Yeah. Very international, an international subway station, But really, what kind of changed my experience, in part, was through soccer. I connected with somebody from the Canary Islands. I had actually gone to the University of Granada because I was looking for pickup soccer, and they were kind enough to let me play. And I really connected with one of the guys, and he told me he was in a league, so I got his number, and he ended up being one of my closest friends. So much so that during our spring break, during the Easter break, he invited me to the Canary Islands, which was incredible. Yeah. And I mean, that would never have even been on my bucket list. I wouldn't even considered going there. Yeah. So that was like a once in a lifetime.
Because you went with a group of what, like 10 people?
Yeah.
More? I don't remember many, but you went all from Granada to like a Canary Islands, like in La Canaria.
So we didn't fly together. They were already there, and I met, from what I remember, of course, Ryanair, cheapest flight fine. I went to Lanzarote, that's the name of the island, because there's several islands. And I pretty much stayed with my friend, his name's Samu, who I'd met playing soccer. And then they also had, while I was there, they had barbecues, him and his other friends, which were mutual friends. Because I had, man, I'm forgetting that expression, but people, it's like hacer botellón. I remember hacer botellón. They would do that a lot. That's like a commonplace thing in Spain, where you just, meet up with friends and kick back in your apartment and have some drinks, So it was kind of like that, but this was more like big barbecue, kind of picnic style sort of thing. And one of his friends lived in this gorgeous, right along the beach, so you could actually walk down the steps, and there were little pools that you could wade in, and it was just picturesque, man. And you had the mountains as a backdrop. It's gorgeous place.
Yeah. It was a good time in Spain. You enjoyed the country.
Definitely. I played some soccer. I, met a lot of locals, and that was intentional. Like I could have I made a concerted effort. Like I didn't do the programs ISA. I didn't do those. Like there'd be excursions, and I would either miss those, or I wouldn't even respond because I wanted to just hang out with the locals and really speak Spanish. Yeah. So as a result, I was able to make local friends, and I didn't really have the temptation to speak English. I had to kind of sink or swim my Spanish.
Well, that's good. That's how you learn, man. That's really that's how, and you got very good in Spanish.
Thank you. And I think what got me into trouble was I definitely I was kind of chasing something that's never possible, which is like perfect 100% mastery of the language. And I remember Alex Okuda had this presentation, and it was like a curve that goes up and down, and I remember looking at that and thinking, how accurate can that really be? And that was kind of what happened with me, where when I first got there, it was kind of just flat. I was just kind of still feeling it out, and then I felt like it spiked up. Like I felt like I was on top of the world, like March, April, and then I just kept learning. I was like a sponge, learning, and then I felt there was one point, I want to say like mid-April, where I hit a wall, where it just almost felt as if, and this is what happens when you're learning a language, is that you can't learn anymore. And in fact, maybe you even feel like you've declined a little bit. And it was so frustrating for me because I just couldn't get through that wall, and that caused a lot of, I won't say heartbreak because that's a little dramatic, but it definitely was a source of frustration and disappointment because I wanted to. There'd be times my friends from the Canary Islands where I would go out with them to, like, funny enough, they'd like to go to buffets and American-style restaurants. Yeah. And I wouldn't understand stuff because they would speak so fast, and I couldn't follow it. And it was just so frustrating because I wanted to chime in and feel like I was an equal part of the conversation, but I couldn't. So, yeah.
Sometimes, and especially in Spain, when they speak so fast, and Andalusia, they speak so fast.
Yeah.
It's difficult to keep up. Sometimes.
Yeah, each region has this thing. Like in Granada, they drop syllables. So instead of Granada, they say Granada.
Yeah, Granada.
Yeah, they drop the D. So.
That was a good time. I know you enjoyed Spain a lot. Are you planning on going back anytime soon?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not in this because there's so many other places I haven't visited. Let's just say Italy, Turkey, Greece. But I mean, I could be persuaded. Like I'm much more interested in having great experiences with people versus going to a country that I don't know anyone per se.
True.
So if I have a good group of people and they want to go to Spain, and there are places in Spain. I never went to Barcelona, which I'm still kicking myself about. Yeah. A lot of people love Barcelona and the Basque Country and Bilbao. Like there's so many places in Spain I haven't visited. It's a big world. So.
Yeah, it's a huge country.
Yeah.
To visit everything, you're gonna need some time.
Yeah. But I want to say, after study abroad, study abroad was pivotal. But really the turning point in terms of launching my career and really figuring out my path. Because again, still up until this point, even study abroad. I mean, I was playing in Spain, right? Yeah. I think deep down I knew I wasn't going to play pro, but I still was not really sure where I would pivot to, even though I was the blog writer and for the study abroad program, which is really cool. But I still wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. And because of that money that I made during my DC internship, I was able to finance a lot of activities, and I was able to travel, which was great, and have a lot of good time and fun. But I got to a point, not just like hitting the wall with learning the language, but also where I felt like it was Groundhog Day. I was doing the same things and making maybe not the best decisions, and and just having fun aimlessly.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I was like, what is this all for? I felt so guilty that, my parents who worked so hard to give me this opportunity to go to school, and here I am, just aimlessly having fun and not really, going in any direction. So honestly, like that led to a lot of not just self-reflection, but I felt like into a deep depression after study abroad, because I felt like I had no purpose at all. Like I had no idea where I was going or what my skill set was, and that my dream was dead, right? Like my initial dream of being a soccer player was not going to happen. So what else could I bring to the table?
Yeah.
And I mean, the only thing I remember about that and how I kind of came to the conclusion that I could be a writer was, I just remember like sitting in our guest bedroom upstairs in my house and just sitting there like thinking. And what came to my mind was my fourth grade. Actually, this is so random, but what came to my mind was I remember the name of my fourth grade teacher, and she was a writing teacher. Her name is Miss Whedon. And I thought to myself, why do I remember that? Like, of all things, like, why is that a memory? And it's like, okay, because that really resonated with me. I really enjoyed writing even at that age, even at the age when I was playing soccer. So that's always been something, a passion of mine. Yeah. But I just hadn't really explored it. I hadn't really mined it, And when I had that kind of epiphany, I was like, okay, I've been, I really enjoy being the blog writer for Study Abroad. Obviously, I don't know if I'd be able to monetize that into a career, being a blog writer, but I can find something where I'm getting to tell stories. Yeah. So.
And that's how you got into writing.
Exactly.
And then we decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to do a master in this so I can master my writing. Yeah. And then propel your career, let's say. And then, so when I applied, like I told you, I only applied to those schools. I got into Northwestern and University of Missouri. Columbia I didn't get into. When it came to making a decision, it was pretty simple. I think I told both of you guys, it was like, do I want a microwave education, which is 9 months at Northwestern and paying $60,000 and having loans? Yeah. Or do I want, in this case, someone who I think needs more training than less? Do I want a 2-year education with no loans because I'm getting very generous financial aid, similar to SoCA? It's an easy decision, no brainer. Yeah. Not to mention, my final semester I can go to New York City. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I went to Missouri, and I don't regret it at all. They call it the Mizzou method. You learn by doing. So day one, I was writing for the community newspaper, so people in the community were reading it. It's not as if it was just students. Yeah. So I got I really sharpened my skills. That's how you get that. So you get a lot of practice, first-hand experience. Yeah. So how did that help you get to the job that you're at today? Yeah. So I want to go back to your first question about what's Missouri like. Yeah, because I want to address all your questions. So I kind of joke Missouri is kind of like a cloning colony. You see one person and you might confuse them with another. Like, it's not a diverse place at all. Okay. Very homogenous. A lot of young, blonde, maskless during the pandemic. So not many people wore masks in Missouri, but it was interesting because very much a college town, a lot of bars that undergraduates go to. I didn't really go to those spots because I was kind of my own little bubble with the graduate students, 15 of us. So we kind of did other stuff. I won't say more sophisticated activities, but we didn't really engage in some of the other kind of tomfoolery that the young guys are doing. Yeah. But it was also a blessing because, and this part I didn't mention, when I went to California, I wasn't alone in the sense that, let's just say, worst case scenario, I don't need anybody. I had family in San Diego, so I got to go there during Thanksgiving. Yeah. And that actually was such a blessing because I got really close to my cousin. We're very, it's scary how similar we are. We also spent Thanksgiving at my place.
That too, yeah. You got to spend it with yourself. And then, so I went from my dad's family, it's my cousin on my dad's side, to my mom's family. So my mom grew up in Columbia, Missouri. Okay. So she was just overjoyed when she found out I was going there because her mom was from there, and it's kind of a very full circle moment because her mom left me a very generous education fund. Yeah. So I know she would have been very, beyond delighted to see that. Oh, that's how I used it to go to the University of Missouri. So. Yeah. Is
that where your grandma went as well? Did she go to school there?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
I believe so. Yeah.
There you go. That really is a full circle moment.
Yeah. So that's pretty neat, kind of walking in the footsteps, of those before me, right?
Yeah. Did you like your experience in Missouri?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I definitely wasn't necessarily like my community, but I met some really cool people in the graduate school. Um, I will say, like, I had some very interesting relationships in Missouri,
Okay.
and I won't go into too many details, but to some extent some of them. But yeah, no, I really, I think more from a career standpoint, I think that's a lot of what I gained. I mean, I also had a couple of lifelong friends I made there as well, which made the experience that much richer.
Yeah.
But from a career standpoint, from like education skills standpoint, I learned a tremendous amount. Just there's so much I won't say technique, but there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into journalism. It's not, like writing an essay, it's a completely different style of writing. So me being, the liberal arts generalist, there's a lot of fluff. I had to trim the fat, cut it down. So.
Oh yeah. Well, journalism, you have to like make very like the headlines, right, and write very brief and impactful messages in a very short amount of time, because you know the attention, as you might probably know, like the attention span of people are decreasing and decreasing.
Yeah.
While in academic papers, you try to add as much possible so you can get to the pace limit.
Exactly. Maybe use some invisible words.
Yeah, you repeat the same thing, in the same idea, one paragraph to the other.
Cite everything, just to have extra words. Yeah, no, definitely. Being a journalist is all about, being succinct, and it's also what they call the inverted pyramid. Most important information at the top, because if it's at the bottom, the reader might not get there.
Yeah.
So.
True.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Well, in essays, you write it like in the conclusion, let's say.
Exactly. Yeah. But what if they don't even get there, right? They don't
exactly.
even get to the punchline. So.
It's a good experience then in Missouri. And then the
overall,
last semester you were able to go to New York.
Yeah, and that's what led to me landing my first job out of school. So, interestingly, the job I have now, I had applied for as an internship. But they at first they said, we don't really do internships maybe just at this city, because I think other markets do. And then I applied, and they said, oh, you're like one of the only people who've applied, and it just didn't work out. Like the timing wasn't there, and there were other offers on the table. And so I applied to the New York Business Journal, which is where I work now, and then I also applied to a couple newspapers in the Bronx, because I wanted to really separate myself from other people, and I figured, everyone else is going to be working at big name brand publications, and that's not really going to stand out. And I thought, okay, why don't I go somewhere that covers an area that maybe is seen as undesirable and isn't something that's of interest to a lot of reporters. Kind of flies under the radar, right? So I applied to the Bronx Times and the Norwood News, and I got both of those internships. But the deal breaker was the Bronx Times is unpaid, and Norwood News is paid, and I'm living in New York City, so.
Facts.
Yeah. And then
at the end of the day, you gotta make that decision, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And my school had a contract in New York City, meaning they provided like housing in the Upper East Side, which is funny because I could never afford to live there now. And it's very much has like a gated community kind of vibe, expensive spray tans, golden doodles, everyone's blogging golden doodle. Grocery stores were outrageous in terms of prices. But so I lived there, so it was like a tale of two cities. Like I'd live in the Upper East Side, and then I'd take the subway to the Bronx, the 6th train. And it's crazy, as soon as you enter the Bronx, the whole composition of the subway changed dramatically. And not in the best way. Like sometimes you see people eating pizza on the ground, like crazy. Like everyone has like a wild subway story, and my wild subway story happened there. I mean, I had this homeless guy with like 3 teeth just sit down next to me. I'm reading a book and put his arm around me.
Yeah.
And we're reading a book together. Seriously.
Did you like read out loud to him?
No, he kept asking me. I couldn't understand him because he only had 3 teeth. And he kept saying like one word. He's like, police, police, police. And I was like, no, that's a metaphor. I shouldn't have said that. I went right over his head. And I read the same page, like it was page 72 over and over. And the book was Happy People Are Annoying, Josh Peck. And I just remember for whatever reason, there was a long layover between stops. So it took me like 15 minutes. It was like 15 minutes. It felt like this guy had his arm around me and we're just like buddy reading this book. And then at the next stop, I got off and went in a different car because I was like, okay, enough's enough. Enough's enough.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So, but anyway, no, it was very interesting. And I just remember the first day of the internship, I get off the subway and there's this park. It's called Williamsbridge Oval Park. So it's literally the shape of an oval. The track's the shape of an oval. The basketball hoops don't have nets. The soccer goals don't have nets, which I hate that. Like I would not stand for that, because you gotta have a net for basketball.
Yeah.
And then I walk out of the park and I see that the address. It's like I'm looking at a cottage. Like it's a really small building. It's almost like residential. I was thinking, no way, is this the office? Because it's like a house. It's not an office.
Yeah.
And then the internship supervisor opens. Irish lady, very sweet, Sheila. She's like, "Oh, Julian, is this Julian?" I said, "Oh, yes." He's like, "Am I in the right place?" yeah, we work here. And there's a whole stack of newspapers outside. They had in a newsstand. And that was what was really cool about this internship. If I had been at the Bronx, well, I think the Bronx Times is print as well, but here, it was such a small operation. Like I would even be responsible for, I would do like administrative stuff, like actually helping deliver the newspapers to some extent in terms of folding them and putting them in vanilla envelopes and even like organizing them in the room, in one of the archive rooms that they had. So yeah, it was a very small, I was the only intern. It was paid, which is really nice. And, it was a nice mix of like, I got some assignments because I'm new. And one time, probably one of the craziest assignments was there was a fire nearby. And my internship supervisor said, "Oh, I need you to just go drop what you're doing. Like, go cover this fire." And I had no idea what I was doing. So she just said, make sure you take, good photos. And then you talk to some residents about this fire, what they saw.
Yeah.
And I just remember, I actually went into the building wasn't on fire at this point. The firefighters had gotten there. They took out. I mean, there was still smoke coming from the building, but it wasn't, a blaze.
Yeah.
And this guy took me upstairs to his apartment to show me where where the fire broke out and all this stuff, and how pretty much how the fire department had barged through his wall and how he deserved compensation. It was pretty nuts.
That's what the firefighter was telling me. Did you record the interview, or you just?
Yeah, briefly. Some of the stuff he told me was he didn't want it to be attributed to him or off the record.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a pretty wild breaking news kind of scenario. And there's another guy who, have you ever seen the movie Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah.
Who was just like that. You can't make it up. He would always be listening to a police scanner, and whenever he would hear something, he would follow it. There was an incident at a school, and I did a ride along with him almost. So I was in the shotgun seat, and he drove us to the school, and we just get out, and there's an ambulance, and they're preparing a stretcher to go into the school. And he just parks right behind the ambulance. He gets out his camera and is just waiting, standing there. And surely, the ambulance, these guys they weren't, expecting a media show, right? They're not, this is a serious thing. And just that, and that's how he kind of makes his money, just straight up being first to these stories, kind of like a Nightcrawler and getting exclusive footage and selling it off to other publications. And that's how he kind of scrapped and clawed, and he'd drive anywhere with his little police scanner. He's telling me, "You got to download this app, man." I was like, "I'm good, man. I'm not really into the whole police scanner kind of journalism." But yeah, and he was, he'd go wherever the scanner dictated.
Yeah.
So I met, he was an interesting character for sure. Kind of disheveled appearance. Yeah, just very interesting character. But
some funny experiences in New York, man.
Yeah, so that was wild. And my coolest experience was, because I'm a very big fan of street art, and the Bronx, that's what I love about the Bronx. It's a very vibrant borough in the sense that there's a lot of beautiful muralists and so many talented artists in the Bronx. There's just so much culture there. And I remember getting off the subway and seeing this beautiful mural right across the street, and it had a bumblebee on it, and it had a little Instagram handle. So I looked up the Instagram handle, and I sent him a DM. I said, "I'd love to write a story about you for the Norwood News." That's the name of the publication. "Are you working on anything currently?" He said, "Actually, as a matter of fact, I am. I'm doing this mural right across from the school. And yeah, you should come by and we can do an interview and you can take photos." And over the course of 2 months, I went 3 or 4 times. And I just remember it was cold at first when I was doing the interview. And I was just trembling, holding my, little phone to interview, to record. And while he's answering questions, he's smoking a cigarette and he's spray painting the wall while he's doing it. He's like triple tasking, you know?
Yeah.
It was awesome. And I had, and just seeing it in action, like it was so geometric. It was a bunch of, because his name's King Bee, so that's like his calling card. It's like a bumblebee. And he was doing a bunch of honeycombs. And basically the landlord of the building had paid him to beautify it because it had been, they call it bombing, where people just like scribble their names on it and it just doesn't look good. It's like vomit, you know, thrown up on the wall. Whereas this guy does like actual works of art. So there's a difference, you know. There's levels. Like some of it's just, you know,
just the scribbles,
graffiti, you know, just initials. So so that was a really neat story, and that made the newspaper. And that was the front. I don't know if it was on the front page. I had a couple front page, and those are the best days where you see your stuff on the front page, your name.
Yeah.
And actually, it's nothing like actually touching your product versus now I just have digital, so you just have it on the website. But actually doing that, because you can frame it, you can share it with people. So that was really, it was. I'm very glad that
Did you keep like a snippet of all the newspapers that you have? You know,
I have one or two. I don't. If you ask me where they are in my house, I don't know where they are. I think they're at home. I don't even know where they are. They're not in my apartment in New York. I think they're at home in North Carolina. So.
Okay, but you saved them because those are cool memories to have.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I just don't know where. Like, there's probably in some scrapbook somewhere in my closet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was. So that really gave me a taste of, you know, reporting, and I was again at a community newspaper, which is great. Like I was never really behind my desk. I was often, like I said, like my editor would sometimes say, "Hey, I need you to go cover this."
Yeah.
So when I wrote stories, I would usually be doing interviews in person, and I would be hopping on the train and commuting. So I was really boots on the ground journalism.
Well, that's a different experience than all those people that were probably at big publications.
Exactly.
They were probably just at the desk.
Some of them were just fact checking.
Yeah,
and they weren't even reporting.
Doing the whole, and that's it.
Exactly.
So you were reporting, writing your stuff, interviewing,
taking the photos as well.
Taking the photos, everything, you know, from front to end.
And I would attend a lot of press conferences too.
Yeah. So
I would see, you know, city council members, the borough president, a lot of elected officials, and I didn't really enjoy those stories because it's a lot of. You're just like recapping. It's like recap stories. Like you just make sure you have the quotes and you include them in your story, just for pretty much like people who couldn't attend the press conference. What are the notable highlights? And my supervisor would always give me a hard time because I would take a photo, but I wouldn't be close enough to the front, so there'd be a head in the way and something would be cut off. So she'd give me a lot of flack for like the photos I took, and that was definitely like a skill I took for granted. And I would often come back from like one of these press conferences and I'd submit my story with the photos, and she would just say, "We can't use this photo, you know, like it's cutting off someone's head. And you don't see the full, you know, sign in the background." So I had to be I had to learn how to be much more thoughtful when it came to taking photos and not just like mindlessly snapping.
Well, I knew you were always a writer, but I wouldn't call you a photographer.
No, I've never been a good photographer at all.
Some of the pictures that you take, man, oh my god. But that's a skill to develop as well.
Sure. And we actually did have a photographer with our publication, but again, since it was such a small operation, they were freelance and they were very rarely available.
Yeah.
So most of the time it was me taking the photos. I couldn't just call up somebody to do it often.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's a great experience. Like right there, and I think that's why you're so good at your job now as well, because of all that freedom that you had before.
Yeah.
Like it's really entrepreneurial.
Exactly.
In a sense.
They call those enterprise stories. Okay. Stories that you go and seek out and find yourself. You're not just beholden to your inbox.
Yeah.
You're not relying on your editor to give you an assignment. You find the stories yourself.
Is that what you do now as well?
Yeah. And so how I got to the near business journal. Like, I don't want to get ahead. Don't put the cart before the horse. Yeah. So.
How did you get to like your job that you're in now?
It was through the internship actually. And again, a lot of this stuff is serendipity, right? Like everything happens for a reason kind of stuff. Like this, you can't plan this, right? I was in Chinatown going out with a couple people from my building. I was living in 92Y. People describe it as like a Jewish YMCA. They have a lot of like programming and cultural events. And I really diverse floor. People that were studying at Bard College is the name of the college. Okay. And there was like 3 kids from Afghanistan who lived in my floor. There was somebody from Hungary, Germany, Poland, the UK. So it was just the whole world. It was amazing. So there was a big group of us that went out. And I remember we're walking in Chinatown, and one of my friends from the DC internship, again, this is like full circle, he was walking the other way, and he was in a suit because he's always dressed to the nines, very well dressed. And I was like, Leonard, is that you? And Leonard said, yeah, hey, Julian, what are you doing? And I just said, oh, well, we're going out. And he said, oh, can I join you? I said, yeah, sure. Just like that, just on like needle in the haystack stuff.
Yeah.
And we end up like lagging behind because we're catching up. We haven't talked for a while. And he first off starts by saying, I've been like following your work. Like you do really good work. You're a good reporter. I think like you would really, you'd like the kind of stuff that the New York Business Journal is doing. Like you'd be a good fit. Yeah. And I said, oh really? I'd never heard of it. Like legitimately. Same thing with Soka, right? Like I'd never heard of the New York Business Journal. I said, oh okay. Like what's some of the stuff you do? And he said, yeah, we talk to new business owners, and I don't honestly remember like all the details that he gave about what it's like, but I just remember his confidence in me was like a vote of confidence. I thought, okay. And then I said, oh, can you? And then he said, I can connect you with the HR person and give you her name, and that's what he did. I mean, so I was able to, and the names escaped me, of course. Actually, she just left the company, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, she had a long career there, and just, we actually are very similar. When I spoke to her, she was really impressed. She's like, "You're very persistent. Don't take this the wrong way. You're very persistent. That's a good thing. It'll take you very far." And how it all panned out was, that kind of planting the seed, reaching out to her, and she told me at the time. Again, I didn't get the internship when I was in New York, but him kind of planting that seed again, because let me step back for a second. So he had told me about it prior to. Yeah. So I had reached out because I would never have known about it otherwise. Yeah. And at that time, there were no internships available. And she said, hey, I hate to tell you this, but you should probably go with the other internships. I told her, I said, I have another offer. I really need to have an answer soon because I need to have it lined up. And she said, yeah, I hate to say this, but I think you should go with this. It's just, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer in a prompt manner. So then she said, and I kept in touch, which was a good thing. I kept in touch with her. And she said, oh, circle back after your graduation. So straight up, the day after I graduated, University of Missouri, again, a lot of times in life, it's all about timing. As soon as I graduated from the University of Missouri, the day after, I emailed her and I said, oh, I just want to let you know I graduated from the University of Missouri. I got my master's in journalism. I wanted to see if there's any openings in the New York Business Journal. And I had already done some other interviews, like LinkedIn stuff, some recruiters that reached out, but I wasn't super excited about any of them. They were very like niche publications, like financial services, but things that went over my head. I read a Michael Lewis book before one of my interviews, just so I could act like I knew what I was talking about. It was Flash Boys. But
of course you would.
Because literally the first round of the interview, I asked, "Oh, what's a good book that I should read to learn more about this industry?" And then I read the book, and then I was ready for the second round of the interview, and then I just sprinkled in.
Well, that's a good way to ask. That's a good question to ask in an interview.
Yeah, definitely recommend that to all the listeners out there. And so after that, I reached out, to the HR lady, and she said, yeah, actually, you know what? One of our reporters just got a job at the Wall Street Journal, so there's an opening. It's funny you ask. So the timing was perfect, and you have to imagine this. I had two people on the inside rooting for me, pretty much. Like, she really liked me, like we vibed. And then my friend, Leonard, who was the one who planted the seed to begin with. Yeah. So what happened was, I spoke to, the first round of interviews, I spoke to who would be my boss, who's not my boss anymore, because there's been some turnover at the company. And I had a good conversation with him, but I didn't really know how well I did, honestly. Like, I didn't really have an impression. I thought it went well, but, I thought I answered in a thoughtful manner all my questions. And afterwards, Leonard texts me. Actually, he doesn't even text me. He calls me. He says, hey, I just want you to know, my boss really thought you did well in your interview. And he's like, he doesn't like New Yorkers. So he didn't have, the other interviews he didn't have good interviews. So you really stood out compared to like some of the other New Yorkers he talked to had an attitude. So he said, I think you have a chance. Like, don't get your hopes up, but like, I think you have a chance, So I kind of had that inside information. Yeah. And then, no surprise, make it to the second round. I talked to my boss, my former boss's boss. And honestly, from all I remember from that interview is we just talked about sports because he'd worked he'd written about sports, and we kind of just talked about like common interests. And it was only 2 interviews. There wasn't a writing test because sometimes when it's your first job, they want to you to prove that you can do the work.
Yeah.
So I was actually really happy about that because I had to do a writing test for another interview.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really a pretty seamless process. 2 rounds of interviews. I got the job, and even and again, this is what's great about having a friend on the inside. Leonard told me how much he made and what to ask for.
Yeah.
So I kind of had an idea. It wasn't like I was going in blind. So I was able to negotiate a little bit, even though it was very intimidating because it's like, who am I to be, asking for stuff? But yeah, and it all kind of happened really quickly because, and this is a Soka connection again. Adrian still is right now a listing agent in New York City. So I was able to get moved to New York within a couple months because he got me an apartment in Harlem, and then I had this job, and the company gave me time to find, and it all fell into place. So it was like destiny. It was like, okay, I was meant to be in New York, and of course I had just done my last semester of grad school there, and I had a professor. The professor at the school, he I won't say commutes, but he flies back and forth between Missouri and New York, and he lives in New York. He has an apartment in New York,
Yeah.
So I just had a lot of people on the ground, and I knew so many. Like compared to any other city I could have worked in, I knew so many people in New York City. It was like it would be foolish, like not. So when I came to applying for jobs, it was only New York. Like that was all.
Yeah.
I didn't look anywhere else because I had all these connections, and I got a taste of it. And once you get a taste, it's addicting. You don't
Makes
wanna,
sense.
Yeah.
And then, so what do you do now? Like, what kind of work do you do at your job?
Yeah. So these days, I cover, and I'll just give like the general, and then I'll unpack what it is. Like I cover retail and office. So new business openings, whether it be restaurants. So in New York City, it's a foodie's paradise, right? So a new restaurant opens every week. So really, when I say retail, I mean new restaurants. So the 2 big categories for retail are F&B, so food and beverage, so restaurants, bars, and then apparel, just like fashion, right? So I do a lot of those stories. And then what's also interesting, what falls under retail, is cannabis. And now New York's rolling out marijuana's been legalized. So they're opening legal dispensaries. And the way they're doing it is social equity. So people that were victims of the war on drugs, that maybe were incarcerated for possession or sale, those are the people that get priority for the licenses, which is pretty cool. So I've done a couple stories on individuals who've opened their own dispensaries that are with legal licensing. And then I also do office, which isn't as glamorous. It's more, pretty straightforward, like company A signs lease for, a floor of space. But sometimes the coolest stories are when you get to write about big companies. So last week I went to Google's new office in New York City, and that was pretty awesome. So
nice.
So I get to check out cool offices every once in a while, and that's definitely one of the perks of the job is you get to actually explore and see the places you write about. And when I walk around the city now, I can just recognize things I wrote about because I've written about, at this point, I've written like more than maybe 100 stories, more than 200 stories, honestly. So I recognize so many of the places I've written about. And it's hard to, when you write about it, you're kind of detached from it, but when you actually like walk on the streets and see then you can understand like what people are saying in terms of, oh, this is a good corner, there's a lot of foot traffic. When you're just talking to someone over the phone, it doesn't mean anything, but then when you actually go out there and see it, then
it's a big thing.
Exactly.
It kind of like reminds me of what Ted does, and How I Met Your Mother, when he walk around New York City and he sees, I designed that building, like the architect, that's you, walking around New York City, and then you see like I wrote about that building. That guy, like, the story behind like opening a food truck or like the kind of you talk to them.
Exactly.
And, the personal story behind everything, right?
Yeah.
So it might just be a food truck, but all of the things that go into it. And that's like you see that when you walk around the city. That's amazing.
And honestly, I would say, and my first coworker, because I'm on my third coworker now, Leonard, just very old soul, very wise. He said, the best, if you want to learn a city well, like be a commercial real estate reporter. And it's so true because at this point, a lot of places that I go to when people are visiting from out of town, some of them are places that, I've written about. And so I have I have like a gold mine of recommendations and places, and I understand, and it's not even just like the individual businesses, like I understand neighborhoods because not often, but every once in a while I do walking tours. I walk through neighborhoods because I want to write about new And that's probably the coolest part of my job is
Yeah.
trying to identify emerging new neighborhoods
Yeah.
that, you know, haven't maybe received historically a lot of investment, but now people are pouring in money, or not even that, or even just places that are very strategic that, you know, maybe have been overlooked for whatever reason, but make sense for a certain category of business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So then, what's next? You know, what are like some of like Julian's dreams?
Yeah. So that's a great question. You know, definitely after the soccer dream died, that void needed to get filled, and I think my first pivot was the first thing I thought of was like win the Pulitzer Prize. You know, because that's the highest award in journalism. But over the last like couple of months, I thought about it, and I think for me, really, because there are goals and dreams, and the way I distinguish them, goals are attainable. Those are things that you can attain, whereas I think dreams, if you not necessarily luck, but they one day will be attainable. Maybe with the current skill set that you have, you're not there yet.
Yeah.
So there's growth that needs to happen to get there, and one of those things would be for me writing a book, and I think that's like a dream of mine. Whether it be a fiction book, and I think I shared with you like a crazy story, I had a crazy idea, but I think even more so, what I've kind of thought about doing is writing a book about my first job out of school, covering commercial real estate in New York City. I know it doesn't sound sexy, I'll have a much better title than that, but I think there's just so many crazy stories I have and interesting experiences in terms of actually being on the ground, meeting people, and you know, the city that never sleeps, and all the hustlers and the CEOs and the successful people and all the things that I've learned, but also the wild things I've seen. I think there's a lot of like meat on the bone there. So I think for me, that would be my dream. I would say these days is to write a book. I'm not 100% sold on what the topic will be yet. I'm leaning towards, you know, drawing on my experiences, in part because I don't want to be, you know, writing a paper and citing a bunch of things and studies. That just takes the joy out of it. I want it to be very personal.
Yeah.
Whether it be like a story, a fiction story loosely based on my life, or, you know, a nonfiction story based on my work experiences and other experiences that I don't think are commonplace for the average journalist in maybe a smaller market or a mid-tier market.
Well, both are going to be amazing, and you better give me a copy of that book. Like, I'll probably pre-read it or proofread it.
Yeah, you'll get the first draft. I'll send you the first draft.
Awesome.
First dibs. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that's always still interesting to me to think about, to reflect on. Is, you know, that was my dream forever. It almost felt like going, and that was what made it so painful. That realization kicked in, like, oh, I'm not going to be a professional soccer player, and having to find something else that you feel just as like passionately about. You know, like growing up, I'd watch all these like YouTube videos of Ronaldinho and Zidane and Kaká, and like it was an obsession, right? And now finding something else that it's an obsession, because I think, and obviously you don't want it to be an unhealthy obsession, right?
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to doing great things, you have to be obsessed, right?
Yeah.
And really, the people that are obsessed are the ones that fulfill their dreams, I think.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good lesson to learn, that while you might have dreams in the past and those don't come true, you can pivot and create new dreams for yourself, and it's never too late to do that. You can always pivot and create new dreams for yourself.
I agree. I totally agree. I think you put it nicely.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast, man. I appreciate you. Julian Nazar, journalist.
That's right.
Architect.
Hey, yeah. I didn't know what to expect, man, but you did a really good job. Thanks for the thoughtful interview.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.